So at first, it was a poll here and a poll there by a point or two. Bernie Sanders maybe sort of getting close to leading nationally sporadically. Then it was more polls by larger margins than within the margin of error. And what we have today is Bernie Sanders leading in the last four national polls in a row and in seven of the last eight national polls. This is an analysis of the polling, not of policy of any particular candidate. We also are going to talk about some delegate math, which I think is very important to understand. Now, this is in only one of these polls does Bernie Sanders have 30% support. But I'll tell you how that can be sort of deceiving when it comes to the delegate math in a moment. First, let's take a look at the polls. The last four polls released recently are NBC, Survey USA, that NPR PBS Marist poll we discussed earlier this week, and Economist YouGov. Bernie is leading in all four of those. The smallest margin is 4. The largest margin is 12. Now, if you go back further and you look at the last 8 polls instead of the last 4, you will see that Bernie is leading in 7 of the last 8 polls. And Bernie is in that 8th poll where he's not winning. He's only down 3, putting him squarely within the margin of error. In 6 of the 7 polls that Bernie leads, Joe Biden is in second place. In 1 of those, Michael Bloomberg is in second place. Now, one of the things we've been discussing is this asymmetrical fight for the Democratic nomination, which requires 50% plus 1 delegates. That means that of the 3,980 delegates, 50% plus 1 would be 1,991. So 3,980, half plus 1 is 1,991. Last week, we did the story where I explained Bernie has to get 50% plus 1. Why? Because most likely, if Bernie does not get 50% plus 1, the superdelegates who will be allowed to vote in the second round at the Democratic National Convention in July, in Milwaukee, I believe it is, will most likely select someone else. In other words, if Bernie falls just short in the first round and all of the superdelegates come in, the most likely scenario is they will all rally around, say, for example, Pete Buttigieg or Michael Bloomberg or whoever. We don't know how that establishment situation is going to shake out yet, but it's not going to be behind Bernie. So Bernie to win needs 50% plus 1 delegates now. He needs to start getting a majority of the delegates in primaries, and so far he's not doing that. But if you want to stop Bernie, you need only split the vote enough, divide the rest of the non-Bernie vote enough, so that nobody gets 50% plus 1, and then superdelegates can end up deciding on that second round of voting at the convention. So it's an asymmetrical battle that is taking place. But there's something that's less obvious about the numbers. You might look at the numbers and you might see, oh, I don't know, Bernie's averaging 27.3 in recent polls. So if we just run those numbers, there's 3,980 delegates. And if he gets 27.3% of those delegates, that's 1,086 delegates. That's way short. That's barely half of the 1991 that Bernie needs to secure the nomination. And you would be correct in that analysis. But remember that in most primaries, you need 15% to qualify for any delegates. It's what's called the viability threshold. Now, it's done at the district level, but to simplify our math today, imagine that it's a 15% state viability threshold. Let's look at an example. California is a good example. California is worth 416 delegates. Huge population, very important state where you can pick up a bunch of delegates. Right now, Bernie has about 26% support in California. But there are only 3 candidates who have at least 15% or more, and those are Bernie, Biden, and Warren. So if these are the voting results in California, Bernie's 26% of the vote would get him almost 39% of the delegates, because that's the portion of the viable candidate support that he has. So you can get 26% of the vote and 39% of the delegates. Now, you would rightly be saying, hold on a second, David, that's still not 50%, and Bernie needs 50% plus 1. And of course, you're correct, but it's far closer than the 26% of the vote that Bernie has in this hypothetical example. In a state where it's, Bernie 25, someone else 17, and then nobody else gets the 15%, Bernie in that scenario would have 25% of the raw vote, but he would get about 60% of the delegates. So remember, this is not exact because we're talking about what is usually district level calculations and applying them to entire states. But the principle is what matters. You might say if Bernie only gets 30% of the vote, he couldn't possibly get 50% of the delegates. You're probably right, but there is a way to make the numbers work. And it's conceivable that if he can get 35 or 38% support, that would actually get him the 50% plus one delegates. You've got to go through a number of different scenarios. But case in point, even though Bernie is polling 20 to 30 in most states, he's still, according to 538, the most likely of the candidates to get to that 50% plus one threshold. 538 says that there is a 41% chance that Bernie gets the full number of delegates that he needs. No one getting the number they need is at 37%. So there's a 78% chance, according to 538, that it's either no one or Bernie, all of the other candidates splitting that remaining 22% of the scenarios. And then, of course, the next point at which we will see the dynamics of this race possibly change will be tonight, because Michael Bloomberg will be debating Bernie and the other candidates. Let's talk about that next. One of our sponsors is privacy.com. They're giving you $5 when you sign up for their completely free service at privacy.com/Pakman. I've been using Privacy for a little over a year now. You've heard me talk about it before. It's a lifesaver, and here's how it works. It takes just a couple of minutes to set up. Anytime you buy something online or on the phone, instead of actually using your real credit card number, the Privacy app and the browser plugin let you give each company a randomized virtual credit card number that you create out of thin air. It'll even autofill the card number with one click. And the payment is taken out of your checking account without the merchant ever knowing your real information. So this allows you to keep your banking information secure, but also to take control of your finances. You can create up to 12 of these virtual credit cards a month. You can set spending limits. You can freeze them. You can delete them anytime you want. So when you do this, it means you're not going to be charged when you don't want to be, because you can destroy the virtual card number right after using it, which, for instance, I love using free trials because I know I won't be charged when the trial is over if I use a virtual credit card number. You're keeping your identity private by not telling companies who you are. You're keeping your bank or credit card info protected against data breaches and identity theft, and it's free. There's no catch whatsoever. But if you want, Privacy also offers a $10 a month plan that gives you 1% cash back and lets you create 36 credit cards a month, and a $25 a month plan tailored more for small businesses where you can create 60 card numbers a month and much more. But definitely go ahead and at least get started with the free plan. You'll protect your financial info. Companies can't charge you unexpectedly. And like I said, you'll get $5 to spend when you sign up at privacy.com/Pakman.